unaccustomed sounds of the natural world, or we will experience the change from the echoing quiet of the streets emptied of people to the sounds of protest from around the globe and the accompanying responses from state and police. The exhibition has been curated and the works have been produced during lockdown, and they offer a variety of ways to both rediscover and reconsider our relationships with our built and socio-politically constructed environments. Over 200 artists from 42 countries submitted proposals, and the 14 artists in the exhibition are based in 11 different countries. Unlike CRiSAP's other online exhibitions, Click Anywhere, A Louder Whisper, Vermilion Sounds, Sound Traces, Not for Human Consumption, and The Voice of It and Its Double, which can all be found on the CRiSAP website, every work in acts of air needs to be performed or realised. We do not know of many or even any other exhibitions where this is the case. Each of the works provides some sort of form or structure through which we can explore our cities of sound and the sound of our cities anew. It is a massive exhibition. To engage fully with every work would, I feel, take several days. Each individual work needs different kinds of preparation and advanced planning, and as such it demands a lot from us. It demands our participation both collectively and individually, and our commitment, and doesn't allow us to be passive consumers. It reminds us that we, to some extent and to varying degrees, have control over aspects of our environment. I look forward to enacting the works, and I hope that you will too. Thank you very much, and over to Lisa Hall. Lisa, you're still muted.
Sorry, just trying to get permission to unmute. Thank you, John. Thank you, Cathy, for that introduction. And thank you everyone for coming. It's really nice to see so many faces here. I'd just like to start with a few quick thank yous. I'll make it brief. So a big thank you to Julieanna for the fantastic performance that hopefully many of you were just able to participate in. Julieanna is here in this session and we'll be talking a little bit more about her piece later on. So there'll be an opportunity to ask questions and talk. I'd like to say a big thank you to Cathy Lane for commissioning this exhibition and for all the support during the process of bringing it together. Big thank you to the artists for their wonderful artworks. Thank you to our review panel. Cathy and I were joined by some international reviewers looking at regional applications. They were Jordan Lacey, Diane Urola and Carol Parkinson. We've had funding from the LCC Research Department and lots of help from artists Hannah Kemp-Welsh, Francesca Oldfield and Helena Alameda, plus our tech team today. So with the thank yous thanked, I'm very pleased to announce the launch of this exhibition. So we went live this morning. Its title is Acts of Air, Reshaping the Urban Sonic. You may or may not have had time yet to click onto it and start checking it out. As Cathy said, it's a big show. There's a lot to absorb. So what I'll do is talk for the next sort of 5 or so minutes about the exhibition theme, and I'll start by sharing my screen and we'll do a tour of the exhibition. Okay, so just bear with me while I share screen. Okay, so you should be able to see that now. Okay, wonderful. So this is the exhibition. So it's an online exhibition for offline participation, as you can see here on this title page. We have 14 relational sound artworks that offer a means to explore and interrogate our cities of sound with artworks that they've made in locations around the world. In the first half of this event, half of these artists will be talking about their work. They are Catherine Clover, who's talking to us from Australia, Kate Brown, also in Australia, Yara Makawi in Egypt, Cédric Maridet in Hong Kong, Julieanna Preston in New Zealand, and Anna Raminondo based in Brussels. And the other artists, you can see their names of there, they will be talking with us at our second event, which is at UK 8 PM time. Okay, so I'll start with our tour. I'll just scroll down on this first page, and I'll jump straight to the bit that it kind of explains how this all works, because as Cathy mentioned, it's slightly unusual. So while the exhibition is hosted online, it requires this offline participation. And what that means is all of the works require you to enact them, to listen to them, or to participate with them in urban spaces. So the works are all relational. They're all made to be activated at a set location in the urban. So this could be a source of water, at a bench, at a place where there is echo. But they can be enacted in any urban environment anywhere around the world. So wherever you are is the place that these works can be realised. And all of the works vary in what it is that they need from you. Some only take a few minutes of your time, others will take hours. Some require preparation for you to write scripts or to find things. Some ask that you do loud and public gestures. Others ask for quiet and internal participation, so to simply listen in an environment. Most of the works are for solo engagement, but some of them are for groups. And generally, all they need of you is to have a mobile phone with internet and a set of headphones and that speaker function to work on your phone. So we very much hope that following this launch, you're able to go onto the website, read about the works, and then go out into the urban and enact these pieces. And having enacted the works, we ask one further step of participation from you, that you leave a trace of your experience. So a trace in some way of your experience enacting these works. This could be, and we're collecting these on our Instagram account for the exhibition, which is acts.of.air. So it could be a simple post with a photo of the place that you did this and a geotag of the location of where you were. It could be that there's you write a description of what your experience was, or something else entirely. So the trace is just supposed to be a very simple gesture. But collectively from these traces, we hope to be able to kind of hear into each other's urbans. So to hear our different conditions and our different urban environments. And hopefully, collectively, from all of these traces, we'll be able to start exploring where the homogeneity does start and end, how our different geographic and cultural factors create different possibilities, and how all of this could inspire us. So that's kind of how it works. And that's how the format of the exhibition explores this theme of the urban sonic environment. But why relational artworks and why acts for air? So I'll just read the opening paragraph from my exhibition text here. Over half the world's population live in urban environments, from small towns to mega cities that house more than 10 million people each. Within the next decade, urban inhabitation will increase to 2/3 of the global population. So the urban is our main habitat. But in many ways, our construction of the urban falls short of our needs. Its design and shaping not always in line with the wants of its inhabitants. And while the built environment is often thought of as fixed and impermeable, the urban sonic is only partially fixed down. It's in the air. It's performed and enacted each day as we ride the buses, press the buttons, and talk to one another. The urban sonic relies in part on our participation, to be turned on, to be sounded out, to be heard or voiced in specific ways. It requires something from us. So it's this relational basis of the urban sonic that leaves space for individual agency. It provides an opportunity to push and pull a little at what this urban is in our ears and on the streets around us. And there's more, but I'll leave you to read that at another time. So my intent was very much to bring an exhibition together that interrogated what it is that we're hearing in the urban now, how it's made, who makes it, and what effect we can have on it in the moment to shape it to our wants or our needs. Because if we're building our cities in sound every day through our participation in our actions, how might we choose to build it differently or in a different way? And so through the open call that Cathy mentioned, we found a fantastic selection of artists and artworks that all spoke to this theme in different ways. So I'll just scroll down through this text and start. So you'll find all 14 artworks here, and you'll find them listed by the different parts of the urban that you would go. All of the artists and artworks approach this theme from very different perspectives. They're exploring the different conditions of being, of gender, of access, of how we connect with what's around us, of authority, of our structure, of how it's built. But I'll let each of the artists talk specifically about their works. I'd just like to talk briefly, just to end my section, speaking a little bit more about the strategies that the artists are employing in context to this kind of relational urban and this fixedness or unfixedness of the urban sonic environment. And I will lightly scroll through the artworks while I do that, if I can multitask. So on one hand, artists have been responding to the sounds of our surroundings that are seemingly fixed, the structures and the systems that are in use all around us and made by other people. So while these sounds feel very fixed at their source, you know, we can't change the sound that the bus makes, or the fact that millions of people commute, or used to commute, through the urban at a similar hour, but we can change how we listen to all of this and how we interpret it. So the space for change in this instance comes in the form of our perception and our listening, in our adherence to the teachings of how to hear, if to hear, and what to make of it all. So a number of the artworks in the show explore these boundaries, gently loosening at the rules of listening. And secondly, the sounds of our urban sonic are made up considerably of the sounds of us, the sounds of our voices and of our sonic gestures that we make as we inhabit these spaces. And these sounds feel less fixed, they feel much more within our control. But of course, they're instead bound by other rules of custom, of culture, of law, and many others. So lots of the artworks in this exhibition explore this and sound out these different boundaries, challenging them or rewriting them in some way, where is possible. And lastly, there is this notion of dramatic change in context to this fixed or unfixed urban sonic. So dramatic change that just makes everything become unfixed, dislodged, or just completely different in some way. So the exhibition is falling at this time of unprecedented global change due to the COVID-19 global pandemic and lockdown. Isolation is demanding that transport and services stop, vehicles, trains and planes, engines, shops and restaurants ceasing. Human activity has relocated to the home to a great extent. So the city of sound is no longer being built in the same way each day. Instead, a new urban sonic present is being made from the changed usage in these spaces. And so this COVID time has uniquely demonstrated how the urban sonic is reliant on our participation, how it needs us to show up and to use it. This shows us also how fragile the construction is of the urban sonic and how it can suddenly become unfixed and fade away. So many of the artists' work contain traces of this COVID sonic present, and while some works focus on it entirely. And there are obviously 14 works here, so there's a lot of works to scroll through, so I'll leave you to explore those. And before I hand over to the artists, I'll just quickly show you the traces section of the website. So as I mentioned, we're very much inviting you to leave a trace of your experience encountering all of these works. So we have this Instagram account here that you can do that. So I very much encourage you to please tell us what's happened. Okay, so I'll end the tour here. Okay, wonderful. So I'll hand over now to the artists to talk a little bit more about their works. So I will hand over to Catherine Clover and give you a quick introduction to Catherine. So Catherine's multidisciplinary practice addresses communication through voice, language, and the interplay between hearing and listening, seeing and reading. Using field recordings, digital imaging, and the spoken and written word, she explores an expanded approach to language within and across species through a framework of everyday experience. Over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope it's all sort of going great. Good. Okay. Right then. The title of my work is Lay By. This work is a text-based score based on 2 journeys on public transport across Melbourne, Australia. One heading from the east into the city and the other heading from a northern suburb to an inner suburb. With this sense of movement and journey, the score is best read while in motion in any city around the world. Movement through space would trigger local versions of the multiple impressions that form this score. Woven through the score is an acknowledgement of country that recognises the traditional owners of this part of Melbourne, the Wurundjeri people. This is how non-Indigenous Australians show respect to the traditional owners of this continent. The acknowledgement informs readers that Australia is unceded land. No treaty has ever been signed between white colonisers and Indigenous Australians. This recognition precedes most public events in Australia today and grounds the score in its geographic and cultural origins. It initiates the complex and nuanced layers of culture that are spread across this continent. There are, or should I say were, over 500 clan groups around the continent with over 300 languages. The score is a jumble of impressions that come into view and disappear quickly, as they do during journeys on public transport. While most of us stare at our mobile screens these days, this score encourages readers to stare out of the window, as we used to do in the not so distant past, and to pay attention to the sounds and the sights passing by. The score is an experience for single travellers or groups and can be read silently or out loud. The score works poetically, and participants can read the words in any order. A vertical reading is just as resonant as a horizontal reading. A single word may be repeated and repeated. The word might jump out at the reader for various reasons. It may seem to eerily echo a word that was just seen on a passing billboard, or it might trigger a long forgotten memory. Graffiti and tagging are a dominant visual feature of the railway tracks, and they're linguistic, although birdsong and insects can be heard when doors open at stations and tram stops. On the tram, birdsong is more audible as there are no other passengers, no school kids or commuters, despite the time of day, rush hour. Human voices occur more readily in the train carriages, as they tend to provide a temporary reprieve for those suffering from disadvantage, unemployment, mental health issues, drug, alcohol abuse, homelessness, and so on, the numbers of whom have escalated exponentially during lockdown. I titled the work lay-by, a term which has various definitions that all involve waiting of some kind. In Britain, a lay-by is a place for drivers to stop at the side of a main road. In Australia, it also means putting a deposit on a purchase to buy later. Waiting is a common experience on public transport and is a useful pause for reminding us to pay attention to the world around us. It seemed an appropriate title, as lockdown is something of a waiting game. And here in Melbourne, we have just entered our second wave of lockdown restrictions. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you. Okay, so next I would like to invite Kate Brown to talk about her work. So I'll give a quick introduction. Kate Brown is a Sydney-based interdisciplinary artist working specifically with human voice. She is fascinated by how the voice sits in the body, how it is produced and projected out to be placed elsewhere. Kate's practice is deeply embedded in a body-centered experimental practice where she aims to harness the body's potential and capacity to produce sounds across spaces, resonant internal, external architectures, and at times technology. Oh, John, could you unmute Kate, please?
Hello, everyone. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'm meeting you from their land and waters today, and I'd just like to pay respect to the elders past, present, and emerging, and to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. So thank you, Lisa, and thank you, CRiSAP, for having me, and I'm super chuffed to be a part of the project. As Lisa said, I work with the human voice I aim to work with it in all its capacities, kind of the full range of the voice. Anything from whispering to screaming, and yeah, in the experimental way that I work, it can be quite confronting for an audience because I produce sounds that we all can make, but we don't often make and we don't often hear in a way that is produced from a non-emotional point of view. So the work I made for Acts of Air is called At the Guts of It. And it's a site-specific work under the Gladesville Bridge in Sydney, Australia. The Gladesville Bridge is a single spanning concrete arch that goes 300 metres or 1,000 feet across the Parramatta River. And underneath that bridge is this beautiful tunnel with amazing echo and delay. And I saw this site a long time ago and I really wanted to do something there. So when I saw this project pop up, I thought it was perfect. And especially during lockdown, I had a bit more time to kind of listen to sites and experience sites differently. And this site in particular was a lot quieter than it normally is, with less cars going overhead. But there was still a lot of sound that was going in and getting trapped in there and sort of whirring around. So I created a vocal score and a performance for video for this piece. And the site itself is quite bleak and dystopian. And I created a character sort of like this isolation nymph that appears and disappears as quickly. And it stumbles upon this score in the tunnel and performs a score, and then gets absorbed by the space and disappears again. And the score itself, I was thinking a lot about pace and fast and slow rhythms, and breathing the space in and out. And I thought about this with the vocal score, the physical movement, and also the video editing in post-production. So in the score itself that you're invited to perform in any echoey, delay area of your town, anywhere that has an echo, really. So the three concepts that I looked at were mimicry, so mimicking the sounds in the environment, cars going overhead, people, the sort of echo delay effect of sounds coming in and out. And at times there was some native birds that even got picked up on the sound recording. So that was kind of interesting as well for that site. And I played with melody as a recognizable sound that the voice can produce. But then in classic Kate Brown style, I took it straight back to the body, right down to the visceral qualities of the voice, and right back to the guts of the body, the space, and the guts of the bridge. And also we were right in the guts of lockdown as well. So it was quite fitting for that. And these elements kind of kept the site in mind and the body's presence within it. And there's three parts within the score. First part is warming up the space, so testing the delay and the echo. And the second part is pace and rhythm of movement. So using the material sound qualities of the space, pitch resonance. There was about a 6-second delay echo in the space that I played with. And part three is the part where we swallow it up quietly. So we take the sound back down after ripping it in half and playing with rounding out the space. And so the last sound that you will perform or you'll hear in the video performance is this slow motion crowd scream. So this kind of sound that sort of like absorbs the body back into the space and sort of like creates this ricochet effect and kind of sums it all up nicely. So yeah, that's at the guts of it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you. And just to remind everyone that if you have questions, and please do have questions, we'll do them all at the end. So if you just pop them in the chat box, then we can come to them in order, or you can wait until we go to questions later. Okay. Next, I think Yara Makawi has unfortunately not been able to join us this morning, so it might be that she's able to join us at our second event. So if you were keen to hear her speak, do try us again at 8 p.m. So I will jump ahead to Cédric Maridet and a quick introduction. So Cédric Maridet's artistic practice explores the active listening, collecting and archiving as a departure point for possible reinterpretation of knowledge and fiction, as ways to construct alternative landscapes and narratives in the form of video, installations, photography, sound compositions, and works on paper. Over to you.
Thank you, Lisa, and then thank you, Cathy, as well, for organizing everything. Let me maybe introduce the work a little bit and also talk a little bit about how and where it comes from. So my work is called Not Quite a Catalogue of Birds. And it obviously makes a reference to the work of Olivier Messiaen, who basically transposed bird songs into musical notations. But my work is not quite similar. It is rather a protocol for a performance to listen and sound out bird songs from Hong Kong. So the works invites group vocalizations of bird calls as a form of non-verbal communication, but not in the sense of an attempt of interspecies communications, but more as an exploration of other ways of being, as a sense of exploration of the notion of alterity, how we can sound different, and also, of course, in relationship to our environment, so other forms of being present in a specific environment. So it does largely is an attempt of thinking of and explore the question of how do we sound, how we could sound together. So the protocol of the work is, as it is described on the website, is you have to choose a bird, one of the 10 birds that are represented through recordings online, and explore the possible interpretations, your possible interpretations of the birds. So you can listen to the birds and you will actually listen to interpretation by Jessica Ng, who's a soprano singer. And I asked her to, I made her listen to the specific common birds from Hong Kong, and I asked her to mimic or reproduce or interpret the sounds in various ways. So it goes from the idea of singing to the idea of whistling or simply vocalizations. And of course, in these multiple attempts, none of them are the birds themselves, but I'm interested into this idea of interpretation, the idea of possible new forms of how we can sound and how we interpret these birds. So in a way, it's a work that kind of calls for a sensitive practice of the world through sound making and through listening. As one, we can actually, of course, it's a group work, so we listen to each other, we explore the space as well, we create volumes of sound that interact with the direct environment. And the works originates from maybe different threads that are present in my work in general. Maybe first of all, a practice of field recordings. And thinking about the microphones as a technological apparatus to possibly augment the range of sound that one could hear, creating a specific situation of mediated listening. And also a practice that defines and records individual listening intentions. So an exploration of how one can listen or could listen through technological apparatus and through microphones. It's also maybe linked to a specific experience in Brazil, where I, during a residency, where I actually recorded an impersonator, and it was I found it was a very fascinating experience, having this person mimicking all these kind of different sounds, and it was like quite an interesting and interesting experience for me that I keep thinking and keeps coming back in some ways. And maybe other forms of works about animals and about the idea of other forms of perception that I could link to the idea of Umwelt, or the idea of the multiverse, as it's been defined by Jacob von Utzkel, as a form of going away from an anthropocentric view of the world. And maybe the last point, maybe that is a part of the origin of the work, is the recent context of lockdown with COVID-19, where we have seen in many cities that animals had a chance to take over cities shortly. And it was, for me, interesting in the sense that it kind of links to a lot of strong tradition of sci-fi works based on a lot of different kind of ways of imagining consequences of catastrophes, and thinking about a universe without man. We can also, of course, think about the COVID-19. We could just think about the catastrophe of Fukushima as well, where suddenly things change. So I think all of these elements are incorporated in this work, and hopefully participants will also enjoy. I think there's a lot of, I think the sense of pleasure as well is also important for me, in the sense of having people enjoying the idea of sounding and creating sounds in their own environment, and exploring and making situations in which we could sound and exist together differently. So that's how I would, yeah, that's the work. And yes, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just writing down questions as I go. Okay, and next I'd like to invite Julieanna Preston, who led us in the performance this morning, to tell us a little bit more about her work. So a quick introduction. Julieanna Preston is a professor of spatial practice at Toi Rauwharangi College of Creative Arts, Massey University, Wellington, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Her work draws from art, sonic practice, architecture, feminist philosophy, interior design, building construction, landscape gardening, material technologies, and performance writing.
Kia ora koutou, po marie e ata marie. Greetings from Aotearoa, where winter still has a mighty grip on us. So I'm hoping that most of you had a chance to participate, or at least listen to the collective or collaborative performance that we did earlier this evening. And I say this because I find it so easy that we begin to intellectualize something, and really a truly practice. The knowing is in the doing. So to give you some anchor points to how this performance came to be, it is a kind of second life to a work that I collaborated with Joshua Lewis, who is a interior designer, performance artist, living in Berlin and also in New Zealand. And we delivered this work called RPM Hums, 16 times over a 4-day period of a performance festival. And this was in 2018 in Wellington. And the site the site of the performance was very specific. It was in the parking lot underneath Te Papa, which is our national museum. And this is significant because the parking lot is actually the, shall we say, the dumping site of all the air vents to all the collections, especially the storage area above, directly above, where all the tonga or the cultural treasures of Māori are kept. Every performance was different, so that we used it as, just like Kate spoke, every performance was different and it was experimental. So we would leave, we would finish, then we'd come back out, digest it, synthesize, and say, okay, well, let's try this next. And one of those experiments, we happened to have, I think it was like 10 people that decided to attend the performance, and we welcomed them to perform with us. So that gives, I'm hoping that gives you a bit of a context for where this work that we are, I guess, still doing even tomorrow morning. The performance work is part of an overarching creative research inquiry that wonders about the agency, vitality, animation of earthly material. And I think you could probably already see that it's belongs to that new materialism, Anthropocene conversations that are ongoing. So my search for this kind of relation with earthly materials has been going on for about 10 years and has moved from looking for evidence of liveness to building empathetic gestures and relations to a wide range of materials such as concrete, gypsum board, timber piles, wool bales, eggs, ice, chalk cliffs, rivers. The list goes on. And perhaps in that list, you can probably guess that I have an architectural background as well as a building laborer background. So this particular work was an opportunity to test the list of materials and to really test the fact that most of them are organic. And what is this turning into a tree hugging exercise? I asked myself. So instead, I proceeded with a provisional conviction that vibratory energy was the key to life, or the force of life, Maori, in Maori terms, a situation that is ecological and contextual, not by the sight of movement, but instead the sound or hum of its resonance in a specific environment. So it can't be understood or felt in a vacuum. The performance draws specifically or started from general research on copper, its ability to conduct, wrap, expand, contract, and repel. And then that led to its use to actually be a core element to motors and their repetition and their transfer of charge and current from one part to another. And therein, I learned that motors make sound. I think that's fairly understood, common knowledge. But the reason that it happens is that motors are designed using what we'll call ideal geometry, which is drawn, calculated, and it's smooth. There's very little friction. But in actual motors, when there are moving parts, over time, parts change. They change shape, either because of cold or hot. They change because pieces break off, they deform, and they don't go back to their original shape. So this is the source of urban noise pollution, or at least that created by motors. And it's a long conversation about how to eliminate that noise, whether it should be, or what is the solution to that noise. And I think that played out quite significantly in our New Zealand lockdown period. I think that was 6 weeks, where that sound of air conditioners, if we just looked at air conditioners, became almost this kind of irritating mosquito-like sound in the city, because there was nothing else or very little else to listen to. And if you remember back about the vents in the parking lot, what I started to realize was that those air conditioners are also venting air, sucking in air. And in fact, as we breathe this evening and making our hums, we are sharing breath. And isn't that a slightly alarming realization. And in the city, we are actually sharing breath with those people that are inside, so-called hermetic situations. So the act of humming came about because of reading a book by, I'm going to forget her name. I'm so sorry. It's called Performing Ground. And it had to do with, which other people have already mentioned, gestures of mimicking empathetic relations. So as we meet each other, we look each other in the eye and we recognize some behavioral gestures, postures, etc. And this is how we get to know each other. So this act of trying to complement, blend, mimic, form a relational encounter with a mechanical thing was my way of testing that animation. Yeah. So yeah, and I think it's quite interesting that the sound that at least I heard during the performance was perhaps less choral in the conventional sense of choral. And we'll see how viral it was. I think that it's quite interesting how the technology of Zoom, even the kind of prophylactic aspect that digital data gives to sound as a material, the cutting in and out might actually do something that we couldn't anticipate, even if many of us were trying to pretend we're motors, which I'm not sure that's even possible. If many of you felt the way that air was coming and going from your body, it doesn't have that same constancy that a motor does. So I've spewed enough here, and thank you so much to Lisa, to Cathy, and to CRiSAP for the opportunity to be part of this very exciting event. Thank you. Kakiteno.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do put questions in the chat box, please, for later. Okay, and our last artist to speak is Anna Raimondo. A quick introduction. So Anna Raimondo completed an MA Sound Arts at London College of Communication and is running a practice-based PhD between ARBA, Royal Académie des Beaux-Arts, and ULB University in Brussels. And that's titled New Genders of Listening, Voices, Bodies and Territories. Over to you, Anna.
Just a quick hi. Thanks a lot, Lisa, and thanks a lot, Cathy, and thanks a lot, CRiSAP. I'm very glad to be part of all this because it really resonates also with my personal practice, which mostly dealing with the daily environment and practices of listening. So I want to say hi to everyone and thanks for being there. And now I will again stop the video because I prefer that you focus on my voice. It won't be easy because I've got a very, very strong accent. So if something is not clear, please do not hesitate to stop, to make gestures because I keep looking at you. So yes, as Lisa said, I'm Anna Raimondo. I'm a sound artist and performer and cultural activist based in Brussels and working internationally. I'm a feminist, mostly dealing with the decolonializing feminism, and I'm trying to define what it could be a gendered listening and how and when it could become a feminist tool of emancipation and empowerment. As also Lisa was telling, I'm running a practice-based PhD between the Royal Académie of Beaux-Arts and the ULB University in Brussels called New Genders of Listening, Voices, Bodies and Territories, trying to put together, let's say, practices of listening, sonic arts and urban geography. My artistic work is always contextualized and asks for participation of the audience at different degrees. And actually the audience is not always aware of the fact to be part of my artworks because often I work through interventions in public and urban spaces. That is the cases of the work that I'm presenting here, encouragements that Lisa host in this wonderful exhibition, let's say. I was to say, let's say about the exhibition, because actually we won't see that much, but we will listen a lot. Coming back to encouragements, it was born while I was working in the Feminist Sound and the Sound Art Archive of London College Communication, the Hair Noise Archive, which is very, very important for me. Actually, I'm a student of the MA of the London College Communication, and we had a time to spend in this wonderful little intimate space full of fanzine, cassette, video, CD of feminist sound artists, thinkers, and activists. And I feel this strong warmth, and I felt this strong empowerment from this precise moment of my life that make me thinking about the moments when I go out from feminist gathering or from women gathering, or the strong and the power that I feel when I speak with a girlfriend, with a woman. And so this was the real moment in which the project starts, because I decided to collect voices of daily powerful women around me, asking them to tell me sentences of encouragement. This was the very first step. Then I decided to think about how to spread these voices, these sentences of self-identifying women around me. And at that time, I was working a lot with the daily listening dispositives. And for this particular project, I decided to choose the phone conversations with headphones, because I really believe that that was a performative and bodily potential in this sonic dispositive. And so in the meantime, I came to live here in Brussels. And so in 2014, I decided to organize all these sentences in a kind of fictional phone conversation with headphones in the street. A friend of mine was filming me very discreetly, and so I start to inject these sentences around me in the urban space, in the public space, yes, by through this fictional phone conversation. And so I start to really use my body, because also I'm Italian from the south, so I use a lot my hands, a lot of eyes contact with the people around me. And yes, this was the project, and now I'm very glad to propose it in this frame, so that we can collect more and more encouragements by self-identifying women and spread it over the world, and shape differently the daily urban soundscapes. Voilà.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you have any questions for any of the artists, then maybe just type your name or type that you've got a question into the chat. I have a question, and also I think Margarita has a question. So maybe Margarita, can we start with your question? Are you there?
Oh, I think we have to unmute you. So let's just work that out. Maybe John will be quicker than I will. There is Margarita.
Unmuted.
Oh, great.
Hiya.
Hi.
Thank you for these talks. And I just started in inspecting the website. I haven't seen the exhibition now. That I have a question. I had a question to Kay Brown regarding the technique and equipment, how it happened in that tunnel under the bridge. If she has someone who assisted her, or it's absolutely personal thing, the performance.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I used a Zoom recorder in the tunnel, placed about 1.5 meters 1.5 meters away from me, or maybe 2 meters away. Yeah, on a stand. Yeah, pointing directly towards my. Sometimes it was behind me, but most of the time it was in front. And there was a mic on the camera as well, so there are some parts in the video that I included the camera microphone as well.
Great. So just to clarify that, Kate, the video is you performing the work. The video that's in the exhibition site is you performing the work. But the idea is that people should go and perform the work under their own bridges. That's right,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, I sort of, I wrote the score and performed the video, I guess, to really present the score as well.
And I think we were
Okay.
talking a little bit about the fact that it could be that you listen or watch, the video in this site under your bridge or your place of echo. I personally found that gave me confidence to then start working through the score and vocalizing it myself. But of course, it's for interpretation by you all.
Yeah, and especially if you're not used to making those sounds, it can be helpful.
Great. Thanks very much, Kate. I have a question from Giovanna for Anna Raimondo. Giovanna, are you there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, hi, everyone. Now, I was just wondering how people reacted to your performance, Anna. And if you can, I always am interested that what we have in mind, how people react. I mean, normal people don't have the time for probably to read all the instructions and the concept. And that's why, for example, I find very interesting that now we can have that Instagram reaction type of follow-up. I think that's very, very, very useful for all of us. Thank you.
Actually, so I made it in Brussels, and I choose very different daily places like parks, coffee bar, public transports, and actually it was very somehow predictable when there was about encouragements concerning, for example, sex, masturbation, all these kind of things. People were a little bit stressed, and sometimes they go away or ask me to go away. Of course, and I think it's quite revelatory. It's not, it doesn't surprise me that much. For other things, there were kind of invisible reaction, like smiling me, that you don't necessarily see in the video, but I feel. For example, I really like the last encouragement that a woman told me. Actually, she was a friend and she just had a baby. So the nurse told her, blow, I see his hair. And of course, without the context, it sounds very, very weird as sentence. And I was like telling with a kind of pathos, because I knew that it was an important encouragement that a woman, a nurse, give to another woman, my friend. And so some people just laugh and think that I was crazy. It really depends also on the sentences, because it's very different. There were very, very different kinds of encouragements. And I think I really invite actually people who will do it to really don't be afraid of this variety of encouragements, because they are very contextual and very specific and very unique. And I think that always they make sense.
Thank you.
I might just jump in there because I know, Anna, you're happy to go in a few minutes, and I just wanted to ask a quick question before you did. 2 parts very quickly. Would you be able to share some of the encouragements that you had received and enacted in your interventions? And secondly, have you done the audio intervention in other cities? You said you made it and it was initially done in Brussels. I was just wondering about the reaction you received in other places, if you've done it in other places. And of course, that's something that should come out through the Instagram in this exhibition, as everyone's doing it in different cities. But I just wondered of your experience in that.
Actually, if you want, as an artwork, I made it in Brussels. Then in my life, I always do it because I'm always with telephone with friends, and sometimes my friends say, it looks me that we are in encouragement work, because I really believe in the power of encourage itself. Of course, I'm a friend, I'm a sister, I'm a girlfriend, I'm a lot of things that needs to this kind of sentences and spirit and attitude. So I didn't do it in other contexts as an artwork, but of course, if I say vagina or masturbation in Naples, I expect different reaction than I did it in Brussels, because here and in London, I in the frame of the master, I did a lot of other interventions in public space with my voice, with my body, and with other sounds, and there's a kind of politeness that makes that the reaction are always like with a certain distance, with a certain geometry of proximity. And of course, I imagine that if I do it in Morocco, for example, when I work a lot, or in Naples or in Marseille, probably will be different. And there are not really specific encouragement I want to share. I liked a lot this one of blow, 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 I see his hair, because it could mean it could mean a lot of things according to our minds. And there is another one that I really liked, that it was the grandmother told to my friend, apechuga y adelante. Apechuga in Spanish, it means like shows your how say that come si dice questo in inglese, non lo so, like to show your attitude and go ahead. And I like it's very simple, but it's really a question of attitude. And I know that we women, self-identifying women, we know about what I'm speaking about in public space, because we always play with our attitude in order to have our place of visibility or invisibility in public space. So I think that this very simple sentence can resonate in a lot of us.
Brilliant. And with the work in the exhibition, with some of the works, we are just saying leave a trace, anything in particular. But with Anna's work, we are asking, if you feel comfortable, please do share the encouragements that you've gathered, because of course the ones that we all gather and then share in our urban spaces will be so different. So really look forward to seeing some of those coming through on Instagram. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
I have a question for Julieanna, actually. And first of all, I must apologise for anyone who knows that the YouTube stream wasn't working for the performance. There was a terrible technical hitch, which we will sort out for the next performance. But a lot of people were on Zoom, I understand. But Julieanna, I was really interested in the fact that, you don't come from a sound background, and your background is in architecture and spatial practice. And obviously the piece that you performed is very much a sounding with and a kind of collaborative piece with the fans and the machines. But I was really interested in your investigation of all these other materials. What part sound is playing in your research, whether you're using sound as a methodology to investigate some of those, I don't know what you called them, but yeah, so the range of materials, basically, what we would think of as inanimate materials.
Okay. The first part of that question, let's just take care of. I don't practice in a discipline. My background is very varied within creative arts, and I am ready to admit that I'm not trained as a sound artist, but certainly we come into this world and our bodies with other bodies with increasing understanding of sound. And then so I feel like there's a certain experience I bring about sound that comes from things as mechanical or systematic, intellectualized, like acoustics in architecture, to cooning and vocal toning courses that I am involved in regularly. So that's my kind of caveat to let me be with you all so that I can learn. But there's also things I think I have to give. So then the second part of that question, I believe I understand it to be asking about when you mention a methodology. Well, originally, really 10 years ago, I thought I was looking for some kind of proof or confirmation that materials were alive. I mean, this is really early on to new materialist ways of thinking. And I decided that the absurdity, I was told it was absurd. I was told it was blasphemous. I was told that you've got to be kidding me. And still I felt like, especially living in New Zealand, where the life force and the land and the air and ancestors are all vibratory forces, that this was something that I could go for, even if it turned out to not be true. But then that all kind of left the birdhouse, so to speak, because it wasn't necessary to find truth or to find proof. What it became was that how do I yield my centric binary ways, maybe even my Western European ways, though that's still pretty intact, I must admit, to set up situations where the encounter reveals aliveness, and it's only in the encounter with these materials and their environmental situations that becomes apparent. And then there was this thing about, okay, well, when you're trying to so-called speak with other things than humans, what kind of trappings do you bring to that conversation? And how it's basically from, again, we're going back to a feminist perspective, how does one respect difference and yet still have a communion with another thing or another person? And that's where that is. So yes, it is a methodology, but it is a methodology in practice and in process. It's not something I could ever say, well, do this first and do that second, and then you've got it.
Great. Thank you very well. Thank you very much, Julieanna. I have another question for Kate, actually. Shall I just ask? I know, Lisa, you have some questions. Shall I just, it's Sandra La Rocca. Are you there, Sandra?
Hi there, how are you going?
Hello. Hello,
Hey.
yes.
Yes, I just had a question for Kate. I'm guessing usually you'd perform in front of an intimate audience, so you have that participation happening. How did you find performing in an isolated space, just in general, and then in a time that we're encouraged to be isolated? Like, how did that affect the way you did things, or did you feel differently?
Can someone unmute Kate, please?
Someone unmute her.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for your question.
No worries.
Yeah, it was really different to the normal kind of performances that I do. And I find the live experience really important. And I've been kind of grappling with this idea of the live and the mediated and the audience and the kind of documenting of a performance for show after the event. So it was really interesting though, because performing in a space that is a thoroughfare for locals coming off the bridge or going through to go up on the other side, there was this interaction with a different kind of audience as we were filming in space. So there was people bike riding or walking their dogs, And so in between takes, we'd have to stop and let people pass through and have a few giggles together.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. So yeah, it was really different, but a really interesting experience. And especially having an audience that wasn't prepared to stumble across a performance, and especially a vocal performance in a tunnel. And it's quite dark in that tunnel. So you do sort of come around the corner off the path, and you sort of, your eyes have to adjust a little bit, and then there's this full setup, you know, in there going on right in the middle. Yeah, it was quite interesting, and a new experience for me, because I haven't I guess documented work in a space that is that live with pedestrians. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. I thought you did an awesome job. I saw the video and yeah, it was amazing. Well done.
Thanks a lot.
No worries.
Can I just jump in as well and ask that in follow on to that? So the people, because I remember you saying that there were lots of people coming and going. It was a big part of bringing together your performance, the video for the work. How were people reacting to the sound that you were making, to the performance? Because I imagine they would catch a bit of it and then perhaps you paused to let them through, or so they were kind of audience to snapshots or moments of the performance.
Yeah, I guess like the whirring of the space coming in from outside, they were experiencing the whirring from the space coming from the inside going into the outside of the tunnel. So I think they were really curious more than anything, and really apologetic about interrupting. But I said, no, we should be sorry for interrupting your space. But yeah, no bad interactions. Everyone was very cheery.
It's really nice to hear your experience of doing it in these spaces, because of course the work is asking us to go and do it as well, and to listen to and watch your video in these spaces. And having done the work myself as well, it's great to hear your experience of doing it, and how others will encounter you, because of course in enacting your work we will become the performer of it to a new audience that pass us by and catch us by chance in tunnels and places of echo.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see the kind of documentation or trace elements that come out of this. Yeah, that's a really great part of the project, that it can keep evolving online with the audience.
Definitely.
Sorry to jump in there. I think Kath Clover's got to go. She's gone already. But I know that you had a question for her. Kath, are you still there, or have you gone?
Oh shoot, I think she's gone. Yeah, I was just going to ask her a question.
Do you have any other questions, Lisa?
I did. If there's a gap in questions from audience, I was actually going to use something that Kate, you said. It's about how I was going to use something you said and pose it to Kath and Cédric, but Cédric, I will pose it to just you, if that's okay. Kate, you were saying that it's about, there's an aspect of making sound that you can make, but you just don't often get to make, or kind of, it's about this kind of thing about having access to making that. And I think that's a really lovely way of putting together that notion of how we're sort of unlocking different ways of sounding, because of course a lot of the works that you're representing today in this session are very vocal. They're very much about the sounds that we can make and shape and add into our urban environments. So I feel that all of your works give that path to us as to how to enable us to make those sounds we didn't know we could make, but we can. And in context to your work, Cédric, of course, the performance is, you've given us these examples. So there's loads of tracks. So for everyone on the website, there are all of these soundtracks of the interpretations of bird calls that Jessica has made. So we get to listen to those and learn from them and then make our own calls and go out into the urban space and perform this together as a group. So as far as the audience go, we will be able to listen to Jessica and kind of take our lead as to how we can make these sounds, and then as we perform it and hear it together, that will evolve how we make these sounds, and to use your word, Cédric, how we can sound together, and of course the environment will do that. But what I wanted to ask was to go back to the beginning and ask, so when you worked with Jessica, how were you asking her to interpret them? You know, where did it begin? What was the entry point to this, how we can sound differently, how we can access these different sounds? Because the recordings you've got of her are fantastic. She's kind of making some amazing sounds that are very different.
Yeah, she has been amazing to work with, and also very open, because obviously she's a classically trained singer, but so it's not necessarily the thing that she does, or actually sound that she should not actually normally sound. So actually the protocol and the idea was very simple for the recordings, and actually in the recording sometimes you can hear the background, the sound of the bird sometimes, which is I find interesting as well, where you have the kind of it was leaking out from her headphones, so you can hear a little bit of the birds, and then her trying to do her best. And the idea was I had 3 different ways of doing it in mind, but I think what I found interesting during the process is that the struggle that she was getting into. So how, for example, to necessarily pitch the sound or how to create whistling. So I was in the end, so I kind of edit everything afterwards to create some kind of a sense of movement from vocalizations or simply more musical interpretations, or simply just really a purely sound making, bodily sound making, like as again an expression of doing something that I don't know how to do it, but let's try. And this is, I think I'm interested into actually these ideas of let's try into something that is not possible to do, and along the way we discover sound that we didn't know we could do maybe. So what kind of new rhythmic patterns, what kind of new melodic combinations will come out, and how these things will evolve over time during the participations. How do we respond to each other as well during the performance? So all these kind of question marks and impossibilities, I think, are actually my point of focus in the work. So the guidelines for Jessica's doing it was, I think, really a starting point, and we kind of work out and actually in looking at how interesting it was not to be possible to be done properly as a way of, again, mimicking. So because it's not really about mimicking, but more about interpretations and finding ways of making these impossible sounds. We are not birds.
Thank you. Cathy, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Sorry. I think there are, unless nobody's let me know that there are any more questions, unless anybody has a question now.
I don't think there were any other questions.
No. So, thank you very, very much for coming. I put a thing in the chat saying there's another launch tonight at 8 o'clock where the other artists in the exhibition are presenting their work. And please perform some of the pieces over the coming weeks. They are good to do on your own, good to do with your family, with your friends, certainly good to do with your students, and especially if you are somewhere where the pubs, restaurants, leisure centres, everything else is shut, and or you can't go away anywhere. So, and thank you very, very much for coming this morning. Thank you to all the artists, and thank you to all the performers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I popped a link in the chat to the website.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thanks.
I'll just click and close the meeting in a moment. Just a quick thank you to everyone, to the artists that are still here. Thanks so much. And we'll catch you all later. I'll end the meeting now.
Lisa.
Thanks everyone.
Bye. Thanks.